of the Sanskrit Academy. We welcome all of you for today's session, which is being conducted under the Balambal Endowment. And V. Balambal, as our secretary, Dr. Sita Sundaraman, just said, was the better half of the great legal luminary V. Krishnaswamy Iyer. And in her name, we have the hostel in Madras Sanskrit College also. So the family has instituted this endowment before many years. And I remember participating in many lectures. V. Balambal Endowment is to be called as Other Poets Day. By other poets, we mean any other poet other than Kalidasa. Because we have got Kalidasa Day and we have got Kalidasa, lecture series and all that. Therefore, those poets other than Kalidasa have been included by the term other poets. And I remember those days when respected C. K. Chandrasekharan himself used to participate or preside over these sessions. And they all used to be very enlivening, enlightening, and also very interesting talks. And for today's program, we have got Mrs. Lavanya Lavanya Pravin, as she is known. She is assistant professor at the Kuppuswamy Sastry Research Institute. She has done her postgraduate degree and MPhil at the University of Madras in the Sanskrit department. And then she came to the KSRI for assisting us in our activities, in our academic as well as in our library activities. And she has been with us as assistant professor. And she will be shortly submitting her PhD dissertation in one section of Yoga Vasishta, which she is reading under Professor K. Srinivasan. And for her PhD, Dr. Yamuna is the guide. And Mrs. Lavanya has assisted in all the publications of the KSRI as well as the Sanskrit Academy for the past 2 years. And also she has participated actively in all our activities as well as in many regional and national seminars in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu and outside Tamil Nadu also. In fact, even today, she was one of the speakers or paper presenters in the national conference conducted by Hindu College, Sonpet, Haryana in the afternoon. And in the evening, her lecture is being arranged by the Sanskrit Academy. And she is also well trained in Carnatic music. Today, she has chosen the topic Bhavabhuti, the poet Bhavabhuti and his works. And most of us know that Bhavabhuti is very highly ranked dramatist, next only to Kalidasa, according to many scholars. And the 3 of his dramas are very well known. And there are quite a few legends on Bhavabhuti that he and Kalidasa lived together. There are many such stories, or connecting him with Umbeka Bhatta, the famous Mimamsaka. And the tradition says, history says, that he belonged to Maharashtra in the 9th century AD. And more about him, I would let the speaker talk. Once again, I welcome all of you on behalf of Sanskrit Academy. This lecture usually is to be held during the Mahashivratri. In and around, just a few days before or after Mahashivratri. Therefore, we have organized this lecture today. And I thank Mrs. Lavanya for coming ready for this lecture and for accepting our invitation in a short time. And let us all listen to her and be benefited by her talk on Bhavabhuti and his life and his work. Over to Srimati Lavanya Pravin.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Good evening to one and all present here. At the outset, I would like to offer my gratitude and thanks to Dr. K. Srinivasan, President, Sanskrit Academy, Dr. Sita Sundaraman, Secretary, the Kupasamy Shastri Research Institute, Dr. V. Kameshwari Ma'am, Director, KSRI, Dr. Balasubramaniam Sir, and Vasudeva Sir, Deputy Directors of the KSRI, for giving me this opportunity to give a talk on Bahvabhuti and his works. In the galaxy of Sanskrit poets, Bhavabhuti is a star of the first magnitude, ranking with Bhasa, Kalidasa, Bana, and others. Sanskrit critics have assigned him a very high place in the company of poets and have praised him in many laudatory stanzas. Govardhanacharya, one of the famous poets, says, Bhavabhutehe sambandhat bhudara bhureva bharati bhati etatkrita karunye kimanyatha roditi grava, wherein he refers to the height of pathos to which the genius of the poet has attained in composing the Ramacharita. Dhanapala, in his Tilakamanjari, says, Spashtabhavarasa chitraihi padanyasaihi pravartita natakeshu natastriva bharati bhavabhutina. Bhavabhuti's plays are complemented on their clear delineation of emotions and sentiments and on their wonderful felicity of literary expressions.
Are you able to share the screen?
Yes, ma'am. Is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible.
Bhavabhuti was an 8th century scholar of India, noted for his plays and poetry written in Sanskrit. His plays are considered equal to the works of Kalidasa. Bhavabhuti was born in Padmapura, Vidarbha, in Gondia district, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh border. He is described as an Udumbara Brahmin. His real name was Srikanta Nilakanta, and he was the son of Nilakanta and Jatukar. One proposes to write on the life and works of any Sanskrit poet, the first question he has to tackle is his date. For Sanskrit authors do not generally give any information about themselves or the age in which they lived. One has to collect information about their date, life, and social condition from all possible sources and scrutinize it in the light of available evidence. Bhavabhuti is no exception to this general rule. Unlike several other Sanskrit poets, he has indeed given us considerable information about his ancestors, original home and learning, but has maintained silence on his patron and date. The following verse from the Rajatarangini of Kalghana mentions Bhavabhuti as a poet of Yashovarman, king of Kannauj. It also names Vakpati Raja as another court poet of the same king. Kavi Vakpati Raja Shri Bhavabhutyadi Sevitaha Jito Yayau Yashovarma Tadguna Sprutivanditam. Vakpati Raja was a contemporary of Bhavabhuti and has referred to him respectfully in the following Gatha of his work, a Prakrit Kavya, Gaudavaho, which describes the Digvijaya of Yashovarman and his slaying of the king of Gaudadesha. Bhavabhuti Jalanidhi Nirgata Kavyamrita Rasakana iva spuranti Yasya Vishesha Adyapi Vikateshu Kathanivesheshu. Bhavabhuti is indeed like the ocean. Like drops of nectar churned out of the ocean, there appear even now in my description of the story some excellent ideas from Bhavabhuti's kavyas. It can be inferred from the above that Bhavabhuti was a senior colleague of Vakpati Raja in the court of King Yashovarman, and that he was not living when Vakpati Raja composed his Gaudavaho in 735 AD. We will now just look into the literary activity of Bhavabhuti between AD 700 and 730. Bhavabhuti and Kalidasa. Bhavabhuti seems to have borrowed some ideas and expressions from Kalidasa's works. I have given a few samples. Following are a few examples. One from the Meghaduta. Ashabandha Kusumasadrisham Prayasho Hyangananam Sadyah Pati Hridayam Viprayoge Runaddi. The similarity with Malati Madhava. Ashatantunam cha Katayatat Yantam Uchedaniyaha Pranatranam Katamapi Karot Tyayatakshaha Sa Ekaha. No mention in the works of Bana and Dandin. Bana has eulogized his predecessors or their works in the beginning of his Ashwameda, that is, poets Shatavahana, Pravarasena, Bhasa, Kalidasa, and the works Brihatkatha, Vasavadatta, etc. But he makes no mention of Bhavabhuti or his works. Similarly, in the Avanti Sundari Katha, Dandin does not refer to Bhavabhuti or his works, though he mentions several other Sanskrit and Prakrit poets like Kalidasa, Pravarasena, and others. So from this, we can say that 700 AD is the earlier limit of the date of Bhavabhuti. Coming to the later date limit of Bhavabhuti, his literary activity, several verses of Bhavabhuti are collected in Sanskrit anthologies. The Subhashita Ratna Kosha, earliest known Sanskrit anthology of Vidyakara of 11th century, cites 31 verses with the poet's name. Bhavabhuti and Kuntaka. Kuntaka, the author of Vakrokti Jivita, has cited illustrations from all the 3 plays of Bhavabhuti. Then we come on to Abhinava Gupta. He has in his commentary on Bharata's Natya Shastra cited verses from the Mahavira Charita and Malati Madhava as illustrations. Then Bhavabhuti and Rajashekara. Rajashekara was a court poet of the Pratihara kings Mahendrapala and Mahipala, and later of the Kalachuri king Yuvaraja I of Tripuri. In his Balaramayana, Rajashekara in a verse calls himself an incarnation of Bhavabhuti. Babhuva Valmiki Bhavaha Kavihi Pura Tataf Prapede Bhuvi Bhartrimaentatham Stitaha Punaryo Bhavabhuti Rekaya Savartate Samprati Rajashekaraha. Then coming to Bhavabhuti and Vamana. Vamana has cited some illustrations from Bhavabhuti's works in his Kavyalankara Sutravritti. Having defined the figure Rupaka, Vamana has cited the following illustration from Uttararama Charita, Act 1, verse 38. Iyam gehe Lakshmiriyam Amritavarti Nayanoho Asavasyaha Sparsho Vapushi Bahalash Chandana Rasaha Ayam Kante Bahuhu Shishira Masruno Mauptika Rasaha Mauptika Saraha Kimasya Napreyo Yadi Paramasahyastu Viraha. So I've collections of Sanskrit I've come from the earlier collections from Sanskrit anthologies around the 11th century. Bhavabhuti and Kuntaka 1000, Abhinava Gupta 980 to 1020, Bhavabhuti and Rajashekara 850 to 950 AD, Bhavabhuti and Vamana 800 AD. So seeing from the above account, it can be seen that Bhavabhuti's literary activity thus lay between 700 and 730 AD. Unlike Kalidasa, Bhavabhuti has given some definite information about his birthplace, family, and learning, though not about his date. In the prologue of the Mahavira Charita, for instance, the Sutradhara gives the following particulars about the playwright. So I have given the Sanskrit quotation. From this extract, we learned that the family name of the forebearers of Bahvabhuti was Udumbara, that they were learned and pious Brahmanas of the Taitriya Shakha and Kashyapa Gotra, who maintained 5 sacrificial fires and performed the Soma sacrifice, that the 5th ancestor of Bhavabhuti, Mahakavi by name, had performed the Shrauta sacrifice Vajapeya, and that these Brahmanas dwelt in the city of Padmapura, comprised in the Dakshinapatha. Further, in the Malati Madhava, the Sutradhara of the play says, Asti Dakshinapathe Vidarbeshu Padmapuram Nama Nagaram, which shows clearly that Padmapura, the birthplace of Bhavabhuti, was situated in Vidarbha. Bhavabhuti was a man of great learning, serious by nature and upright in conduct. He was proud of his descent from a learned and pious family renowned for their religious and charitable works. Bhavabhuti had an extraordinary command of the Sanskrit language. He is described as Vakyavak, one who is a master of speech in the Uttararama Charita, and the claim is not unjustified in view of his effective delineation of sentiments. He had made a deep study of the literary and rhetorical works of his predecessors. He had a great respect for Valmiki as revealed by some passages of the Mahavira Charita and the Uttararama Charita. All his 3 plays, the Mahavira Charita, Malati Madhava and Uttararama Charita, were first staged not in any royal court but at the fair of the sun god at Kalapriya, modern Kalpi, a few miles to the north of Padmavati. By the performance of his plays at the fair, his fame seems to have spread far and wide. It reached the ears of mighty King Yashovarman of Kannauj, who was himself a poet and had written a play on the life of Rama. He invited Bhavabhuti with great respect and made him the poet laureate at his court. While re-editing the Malati Madhava, the following was noticed in an old manuscript of the play collated by Sri R.G. Bhandarkar. Ato yadasmakam arpitam priya suhrida tatra bhavata kashyapena bhavabhuti namna brahmanena prakranam Malati Madhavam nama tadeva bhagavatah kalapriyanatasya sakala jagateka chakshusho vishwatmanaha suryasya parato yatha prayogena prakhyapayitum aham udyataha. Now we will move on to the 3 main works of Bhavabhuti, Mahavira Charita, Malati Madhava and Uttararama Charita. I have gone through each and every act, giving a summary of the act, and I have quoted a few special, few verses which have some special features, bringing out the genius of Bhavabhuti. Mahavira Charita, Mahavira Charita is the first play of Bhavabhuti, which gives in 7 acts the main incidents in the Ramayana up to the defeat of Ravana and the coronation of Rama. The portion from the 46th verse of the 5th act to the end of the play exists in 2 different recensions in North and South India. The authorship of the North Indian recension is ascribed to a poet by name Vinayaka, and that of the South Indian recension to a poet named Subramanya. This play was first staged at the fair of Kalapriyanatha. The prologue of the play begins by offering salutations to the self-existent, eternal, purifying and imparted supreme spirit, Brahman. The Sutradhara then indicates the nature of the play. Mahapurusha Samrambho yatra Gambhira Bhishanaha Prasanna Karkasha yatra Vipulartha cha Bharati Aprakriteshu Patreshu yatra Viraha Stitorasaha Bhedaihi Sukshmair Abhivaktaihi Pratyadharam Vibhajyate. The Sutradhara then proceeds to introduce the playwright to the audience. The poet is described as being fond of Veera and Adbhuta Rasas, which account for this play of his on the life of Rama. The following verse explains why he selected the theme. Prachetaso Munivrisha Pratamah Kavinam Yatpavanam Raghupatehe Pranina Vritam Bhaktasya Tatra Samaramsata Mepi Vachastaha Suprasanna Manasaha Pritino Bhajantam. The edifying life of Raghupati, written first by the pioneer poet Valmiki, has prompted me, a devotee of him, to sing it. May good men savor of this composition. In the first act, sage Vishwamitra, he calls for Rama and Lakshmana to guide his sacrifice against the demons. He has also invited King Janaka But Janaka is not able to attend the sacrifice, and he sends his brother Kushadwaja and his daughters Sita and Urmila as his representative. So in this act, the appearance of Tataka in the precincts of Vishwamitra's ashrama causes a shudder among the rishis, women, and children. Her form is described thus: Antraprota Brihat Kapala Kapala Nalaka Krurak Panat Kankanak Praya Prenkita Bhuro Bhushanaravar Aghoshayantyambaram Pitochardita Rakta Kardama Dhana Pragmara Ghorollalat Vyalolas Tanabhara Bhairavapur Bandhodatam Dhavati. Hither comes Tataka running in a terrifying form. The necklace of skulls, stringed in an intestinal cord, is striking against her bone-made bangles and ornaments which rent the skies with a shrill echo. The blood that she had gulped and vomited had smeared heavily her drooping breasts. This description is eloquent of Bahvabhuti's masterly picturization. In conformity with the sentiment that he seeks to suggest, he has used the Gaudi style combining long compounds and words of hard consonants. A great many variations from the Valmiki Ramayana has been introduced by Bahvabhuti in the structure of this act. He has chosen Vishwamitra's ashrama as the place for such incidents as Ahalya's redemption, Tataka's death, the presentation of Janbakastra to Rama and Lakshmana, and so on. Act 2, Malyavan, Ravana's minister, receives a letter from Parashurama written on a palm leaf which contains a concealed threat to Ravana. Brahmanati kramatyago bhavatameva bhutaye jamadagnyascha vo mitra manyatha durmanayate. The hand that annihilated the Kshatriyas would proceed to do the same in the case of the demons. Also, an open assurance of friendship had been conveyed on the condition that the persecution of the sages in the Dandakaranya is stopped. The above verse has been cited in rhetorical works like the Kavya Prakasha as an example of Madhyama Kavya in which the explicit and implicit senses are treated with equal weight. Jamadagnya is charmed by Rama's sober and handsome figure, and he whispers to himself when he meets Rama, Ramaniyaha Kshatriya Kumara Asit. The verb Asit in the past tense is suggestive of the future fate of Rama that Jamadagnya has in mind. He says, Pragaprapta Nishumbha Shambhavadanur Vedakriyavirbhavat Krodha Prerita Bhima Bhargava Bhuja Stambhapa Vidda Kshanat Sajwalaha Parashur Bhavat Tvashitilas Patkanta Pitatitir Yenanena Jagat Sukhanda Parashur Devohara Kyapyate. You have angered me by breaking Shiva's bow, which all these days has not had even a scratch. I hurled this glittering axe, which gave to Lord Shiva the appellation Khanda Parashur, one whose axe is broken. Let it strike your neck instantaneously. The first 3/4 of the verse suggests Raudra Rasa, and so they have long compounds. But the fourth quarter reflects the devotion of Jamadagnya for Lord Shiva, so long compounds have been avoided. The characters of the boastful sage and the composed and courteous Rama are well contrasted. Jamadagnya, being touched by the words of Rama, says, Rama Rama Nayanabhiramatam Ashayasya Sadrishim Samudvahan Apratarkya Guna Ramaniyakaha Sarvathaiva Hridayangamosti me. You are as magnanimous in heart as you are handsome in appearance. Your qualities defy my comprehension. You have completely captured my heart. The choice of words and of the Rathodata meter in this verse are quite appropriate for its sense. In the third act, sage Vashishta, the family priest of Rama, Vishwamitra and Shatananda try to calm Parashurama with arguments including Dasharatha's plea, the seniority of Vasishta to Parashurama, and Shatananda's warning to use his penance powers against Parashurama. The boastful nature of Jamadagnya, his passion for cruelty, his arrogant behavior with Vasishta are all well portrayed in this act. Act 4 begins with a Vishkambaka. Malyavan and Shurpanaka learn of Parashurama's defeat. Malyavan orders Shurpanaka to possess the body of Manthara, Queen Kaikeyi's maid, and plots to bring Rama to the Dandaka forest, where Ravana's demons and the monkey Ali Vali would get rid of him. Sita could then be easily acquired for Ravana, and his brother Vibhishana would not be able to interfere. In the same scene, The defeated Parashurama politely talks to Vishwamitra and Vashishta and Vishwamitra and King Dasharatha, with whom he quarreled in the last act, and he is forgiven for his transgressions. Sage Vashishta says, Adyaha naha shrotriyanam kule jataha. Turvinite tvayi vayam dukitaha sukino anyatha nisargo hyesha vriddhanam yattu shreyas tathaiva tat. Today, are you born among us? We are pained at your intransigent attitude, but now that you are changed, we feel happy. This is in the nature of us old men, but what is good is always good. Parashurama gives away his weapons and requests Rama to protect the sages of the Dandaka forest. The possessed Manthara brings a false letter from Kaikeyi, which instructs Dasharatha to send Rama to the forest for a 14-year exile and crown her own son Bharata as the king. Astvekena varena vatsabharato bhoktadi rajyashriyaha yatvanyena vihaya kalaharanam ramo vane dandakam tasyam chiradaras chaturdasha samas tishtatvasau tam punaha Sita Lakshmana matrikat parijanat anyona chanubrajet. Listening to this wish, Dasharatha faints. Bharata agrees to rule the kingdom till Rama returns and takes Rama's sandals as his reminder. The sorrow of Ayodhya is described. Rama with Sita and Lakshmana leave for the forest. The next act, Act 5, begins with a short story about Shurpanaka's lusting for Rama and Lakshmana cutting her nose. The vulture Jatayu sees Rama and Lakshmana chasing a deer when Ravana kidnaps Sita. Jatayu dies trying to protect Sita. In his last verse, he reveals, Yam Aushadim Ivayushman Vichinoshi Vane Vane Sasita Mamachaprana Ravaneno Bhayam Kritam. Dear son, Ravana has taken away both my life as well as Sita, whom you are searching for in this forest, as if you are looking for a medicinal herb. This verse occurs in the Valmiki Ramayana almost in these very words. As Rama and Lakshmana move forward, they hear the distress call of Shramana. Lakshmana kills Deman Kabanda and frees Shramana, the envoy who has joined forces with Vali's brother Sugriva. Malyavan instigates Vali to attack the grief-stricken Rama. Vali confronts Rama, and this is where Bhavabhuti's Act 5 ends. Act 5 continues with a fair duel between Vali and Rama. Rama slays Vali, who in his dying breath asks Rama for forgiveness and advises him to form an alliance with Sugriva and Vibhishana. Now from this, from the 46th, the Bhavabhuti's Act ends with the 46th verse in the 5th Act. From then, we have, mentioned before, there are two recensions, one from the North India and the other from the South India. So I'm giving a brief account of these two recensions. Now, the text current in North India, the Act 5 continues with a fair duel between Vali and Rama and Rama slays Vali. Act 6 begins with a disappointed Malyavan learning that his plans have failed. Then Lanka is set on fire by Hanuman and Ravana's obsession with Sita and his wife Mandodari's plea to return Sita. In the main scene, Mandodari tells Ravana about a bridge of floating rocks to be built by the monkeys. The god Indra and Gandharva Chitraratha come to witness the epic war between Rama and Ravana. The whole war is presented as a dialogue between them. Finally, Rama slays Ravana. Act 7 starts with the presiding deities of cities Lanka and Alaka discussing Sita's trial by fire, Vibhishana's coronation, and Rama's preparation to return home. Rama and his party return to Ayodhya, describing the places they see below them. Hanuman flies to convey the message of Rama's arrival to Bharata. A welcome party greets Rama, and the play ends with Rama's coronation. So this is the North Indian recension by one poet named Vinayaka. As regards the South Indian recension, Act 5 continues with Vali and Rama agreeing to fight. In Act 6, we can see Rama kills a deer not knowing it is Vali, cursed by a sage and turned into a deer. Sage Agastya gives Rama divine vision so that he can see the evil designs of Malyavan and Ravana. Act 7 starts with a conversation between Indra and Dashratha. They discuss Ravana's defeat, Vibhishana's coronation, Sita's fire ordeal, and Rama's arrival in Ayodhya. The gods and sages bless the crowned Rama and Sita, ending the play. Bhavabhuti's inspiration is the Ramayana, the earliest narrative of Rama's life. he has deviated with the Ramayana plot at many places, like love feelings in Sita's heart, Kaikeyi absolved of all guilt, Shurpanaka possessing Manthara, and Rama killing Vali in a fair battle. Bhavabhuti has even quoted some Ramayana verses verbatim. The heroic sentiment is the backbone of the play, mingled with Raudra, Vibhatsa, and Adbhuta Rasa. In depicting these rasas, Bhavabhuti employs long consonants in a few places, where elsewhere he uses those of soft ones. Now we move on to the next play of Bhavabhuti, which is the Malati Madhava. Malati Madhava is a Prakarana type of Rupaka in 10 acts. Subject matter is the love story of Malati, the daughter of Bhuri Vasu, a minister of Padmavati, and Madhava, a young man studying in the city and son of Devarata, who is the minister of the king of Vidarbha. Within this main story, the love story of Makaranda, a friend of Madhava, and Madayantika is also skillfully portrayed. Bhavabhuti has extracted the plot of Malati Madhava from the Brihat Katha of Gunadya. He has mainly depended upon the story of union between Malati and Madhava, which covers the 13th chapter of the Kathasarit Sagara and also covers the 3rd chapter to embody the incidents of the 5th act of the play. This play is placed second in chronological order. This is because Bhavabhuti's bitter reference to his critics seems to point to the fact that his earlier work did not meet with their approbation. Ye nama kenachit iha naha pratayantavagnyam jananti te kimapi tan pratinaisha yatnaha utpatsyate esti mama kopi samana dharma kalohyayam veravadir vipulacha prithvi. Those who are publicly disparaging me knew very well that I have not written my work for them. Someone of my disposition who is qualified to appreciate this composition may be born hereafter or may even be living now, for time is endless and the earth vast. Bhavabhuti's prophecy proved true and recognition came to him in his own lifetime. With the passage of time, his plays became increasingly popular. Some people ranked him as an equal of, and in some respects, even superior to Kalidasa. We begin with the Act 1. After the Nandi, the Sutradhara recites the prayer, Kalyananam Tvamasi Mahasam Bhajanam Vishwamurte Guryam Lakshmi Martham Mayi Brisham Dehi Deva Prasida Yadyat Papam Pratijahi Jagannatha Namrasya Tanme Badram Badram Mitara Bhagavan Bhuyase Mangalaya. As this play was first staged at the fair of the Kalapriya Natha, the sun god at Kalpi, it is appropriate that the verse invoking the sun god's grace should be recited. Through the Vishkambaka, Bhavabhuti gives a good deal of preliminary information about Kamandaki, a Buddhist nun, the solemn promise made by Bhuri Vasu and Devarata that they would join their offsprings, Malati and Madhava, Malati and Nandana in Madhava in wedlock, and Saudamini, disciple of Kamandaki, was well accomplished in yoga. Kamandaki, who had secret instructions to bring about the much coveted connection between Malati and Madhava, feels encouraged to pursue her plans along with her disciple Avalokita. Further, they also wish that they could bring about the union of Makaranda, Madhavi's friend, and Madayantika, Nandana, a favorite of King of Padmavati's sister. The portrait of Madhava, delineated by Malati, reaches the hands of Madhava, and this act ends with a description of his love pacts. Act 2, Malati's passion undoubtedly reached its climax after meeting Madhava in the garden. To make matters worse, Malati's father, Bhuri Vasu, promised to give her in marriage to Nandana, a minister of the king. This forms the initial scene of this act. As a messenger, Kamantiki has acted cleverly when she says, Vare asmin doshaha pitari vichikitsahi janita pura vrittodgharairapi chakatita karya padavi stutam mahatmyam yada vijanato yachagunataha prasangat vatsasyet kalu videyaha parichayaha. I have indicated the shortcomings of the other groom. I have created suspicion in Malati's mind about her father's intention. I have suggested what she should do by mentioning again ancient legends. In the course of my talk, I have praised Madhava's superiority in respect of his family and his merits. I have now only to bring them together so that they will come to know each other. Towards the end of this act, Kamandiki prepares Malati's mind for a marriage by self-choice. In the third act, Kamandiki arranges for a meeting of Malati and Madhava with their knowledge. She tells Malati about Madhava's sufferings, while Lavangika also describes a similar pathetic condition of Malati. Buddharakshita, on the other hand, shouting for help to save Madayantika from the clutches of a tiger which had entered that garden, seizes every occasion to create a feeling of light in Madayantika's heart for Makaranda and also succeeds in her object. In the fourth act, Malati and Madhava are in despair hearing the news about Malati's marriage with Nandana, but Kamandaki assures them of their reunion even at the cost of her life. So from these two acts, it is made known that the two love stories, one between Malati and Madhava and the other between Madayantika and Makaranda, progress simultaneously. In all descriptions in Prakrit, whether they are of the spring garden, of Malati's condition, etc., Bahvabhuti has used long compounds, difficult to comprehend, but the verses are lucid and delectable. Act 5, this act is laid in a symmetry of Padmavati near the temple of goddess Karala. Kapala Kundala, a disciple of Aghora Ganta, has been directed by him to make arrangements for the worship of the goddess. Madhava approaches the cemetery to offer his flesh, being sad that Malati will be married to Nandana. So he approaches the cemetery and invites the spirits there to buy the human flesh from him. The description of one of the spirits is given here. Utkrityotkritya kritim prathamamata prutuchopa bhuyamsi mamsan yasas sprishta pindadyavayava sulabhan yugra puti nikjagdva आत्तस्नायवन्त्रनेत्रः प्रकटितदशनः प्रेतरङ्कः करङ्कात् अङ्कस्तात् अस्ति संसंस्त उटगतमपि क्रव्यमव्यग्रमति. This lean spirit is tearing off skin from the various limbs of the corpse on its lap and eating the extremely stinking flesh readily obtainable from its shoulders, hips, back and thighs, and pulling out its muscles, intestines and eyes. It is slowly eating with a grin, even that in the hollow of the bones. This is a most repulsive description which has been cited as a standard illustration of Bibhatsa Rasa in rhetorical and dramaturgical works like the Kavya Prakashika and the Dasharupavaloka. It shows Bhavabhuti's capacity for delineating the sentiments. Two sentiments predominate in this act, the Bibhatsa and the Raudrasa. The word picture of the goddess Karala's dance, Bhavabhuti has used a large Dandaka meter having as many as 64 syllables in each quarter, comprising first two Naganas of 3 short syllables each, followed by 16 Raganas, each consisting of 1 short syllable between 2 long ones. The meter thus imitates the rhythm of the steps of the goddess in dancing. Moving on to the next act, Kapala Kundala is glad that she might find an opportunity. From the interlude, it is known that Kapala Kundala was to take revenge on Madhava, who had defeated her guru, Aghora Ganta. The main scene begins with a celebration started on the occasion of Malati's marriage with Nandana. Kapala Kundala is glad that she might find an opportunity in the bustle of marriage to carry out her wishes. Sorry, it's not Kapala Kundala, it is Kamandiki. She asked Makaranda to put on Malati's bridal dress and gets married to Nandana under that disguise. Kamandiki then directs Madhavi and Madhava and Malati to approach to her own sanctuary, where preparations were being made by Avalokita to celebrate their nuptial ceremony. Act 7, Nandana comes to know how he was deceived by Makaranda, who was in the disguise of Malati. Makaranda then confesses his love to Madayantika. Lavangika asks both Makaranda and Madayantika to go to the place where Malati and Madhava had already gone. The next act, Buddharakshita, Lavangika and Madayantika, accompanied by Kalahamsaka, approach Madhava and inform him that Makaranda had been engaged in an encounter with the city guards. Madhava proceeds to help Makaranda. Kapala Kundala enters and finding Malati alone, snatches away her to Sri Parvata to put her to death. Lavangika and Madhyantika search for Malati, where Kalahamsa comes and describes in a lengthy Prakrit speech full of long compounds the pitched battle in which Madhava and Makaranda defeat the king's forces. Madhava and Makaranda too return after being honored by the king, who was pleased at their extraordinary valor. Coming to know that Malati is found nowhere, they both leave for Kamandaki's residence in the hope of finding Malati. In Act 9, Saudamini, a disciple of Kamandaki, arrives at Padmavati in search of Madhava to inform him that Malati was safe. She finds Madhava and Makaranda and tells how she rescued Malati from Kapala Kundala. She proceeds to say, Gurucharya tapas tantra mantra yogabhi yogajam imam akshepini siddhim atanomi shivaya bha. I have acquired the miraculous power of transport through the service of my guru, penance, tantra, incantations, and yoga. I now utilize it for your well-being. Then she flies up into the sky with Madhava. Makaranda goes in search of Kamandaki to communicate her the happy news that Malati was safe. Coming to the last act. This act begins with Kamandaki, Lavangika, and Madhyantika lamenting over the disappearance of Malati. Recalling Malati's babyhood, Kamandaki says, Aniyata tarudita smitam virajat katipaya komala danta kudmalagram vadana kamalakam shishoho smrami skaladas samanjasa mugdha jalpitam te. I remember even today your lotus-like face with its random cries and smiles, showing the tips of a few tender teeth and lisping meaningless and sweet words. This verse appears verbatim in Lavanya Charita, verse 4 of Act 4, when Janaka recalls Sita's childhood. A similar verse also occurs in Kalidasa's Shakuntala, where Dushyanta sees little Sarvadamana in the 7th Act, verse 17. The similarity between the two verses is striking. There is not a single scene in Bhavabhuti's play where a child appears as a character. That is probably why he has made Kamandaki and Janaka describe the babyhood of Malati and Sita respectively. Saudamini rescues both Malati and Bhurivasu, and all of them praise the noble lady for her wonderful deed. Saudamini then hands over a letter addressed to Madhava, which contains Bhurivasu's approval of the two love marriages. Saudamini remarks that it was happier that the wish of the ministers Bhurivasu and Devarata regarding the mutual relationship of their children had been fulfilled after a long time. On being asked by Kamandaki, Madhava prays for the following in the Bharatavakya. May good men, cleaned of their sin, abide by the right path. May kings always rule the earth in conformity with their religious duty. May the religious merit of the people cause timely rains, and may all people derive intense joy from the company of their friends and relatives. Shringara is the predominant sentiment in this play. Bhavabhuti adopted the Vaidarbhi Riti for the depiction of this sentiment, while Vibhatsa and Rautra Rasas are to be delineated. He has adopted the Gaudi Riti. We move on to the third play, the Uttara Ramacharita. So it is a play in 7 acts in the Nataka style, depicts the later life of Rama from the coronation after his return from exile to his reunion with Sita, whom he abandoned immediately after his coronation, and his two sons Lava and Kusha, covering a period of more than 12 years. In the Act 1, the Nandi of this play differs from those of the other two plays. It does not contain any invocation either to the Supreme Being or to a god. It is a prayer to the ancient seers that they bless the poet so that he may attain the divine power of speech. Idam kavibhyaha purvebhyo namovakam prashasmahe vande mahi chatam vachamamritam atmanaha kalam. In the prelude, the audience is informed about the completion of Rama's coronation and the return of all the guests to their respective homes. The Sutradhara also alludes incidentally to the rumors in Ayodhya about Sita's character, as some people had no faith in the fire ordeal which had taken place in Lanka. Bhavabhuti makes the Sutradhara say, Sarvatha vyavahartavyam kuto hyavachiniyata yathastrinam tathavacham sadhutve durjano janaha. One has to do his duty, whatever may happen, for there is no escape from censure. There will always be evil-minded people who will suspect the purity of literary works as they would the chastity of women. Rama is trying to comfort disconsolate Sita when a messenger arrives from the hermitage of Rishnishringa with a message by all elderly people such as Vasishta, Arundhati, and others. Sage Vasishta sends word to Rama to preserve the glory of his race by looking to the welfare of his subjects. He says, Jamatra yajnena vayam niruddhastvam bala evasi navam cha rajyam yuktaha prajanam anuranjane syat tasmad yasho yatparam dhanam vaha. Soon Lakshmana arrives and advises Rama and Sita to pay a visit to the picture gallery. The scene continues with the background of the gallery and the couple seeing the paintings presenting different scenes from the past when a spy arrives to inform Rama about the happenings and he discloses his aspersions cast on the purity of Rama. Rama, though, is shown in a dilemma for a moment. He says, Satam kenapi karyena lokasyaradhanam vratam Yatpuritam hi tatena mamcha pranamscha munchata. To propitiate the people by any means must be the sacred duty of all good people. It was in the fulfillment of that duty that my father abandoned me and even his own life. His mind as a king wins over him as a husband, and he orders Lakshmana to take Sita to the forest and leave her there. The scene of the picture gallery is magnificent, for it vividly portrays the mutual love of Rama and Sita and the happy life they enjoyed even in exile. The various incidents in this act reveal the different facets in Rama's personality, like his freedom from self-control, modesty, intense love for Sita, and respect for others' views. Second act, Bhavabhuti has utilized the interlude to narrate briefly the events that occurred in Ayodhya and in sage Valmiki's ashrama in the period of 12 years that has elapsed since the happenings of the first act. Rama begins to perform the Ashwameda sacrifice, and Chandraketu, Lakshmana's son, is given the duty to protect the sacrificial horse. A Shambhuka, a Shudra ascetic, was held guilty for the death of a Brahmin boy, and people requested their king, Rama, to save them from the upcoming disasters by killing Shambhuka. Shambhuka is killed by Rama in the Dandakaranya forest, which is a slight twist in the story, where Shambhuka's soul is shown to be greeting Rama for having raised him to heaven. Thereafter, Rama decides to visit the hermitage of sage Agastya, who had wished to see him to pay his respect. In this act, the following verse is a very popular one which occurs when Atreyi says that Rama has he is using a golden image of Sita as his partner in the rituals. Vasanti exclaims, Vajradapi kathorani mriduni kusumadapi Lokottaranam chetamsi konu vijnatum arhasi. The description of the Dandaka forest is rather prolix, but it shows that Bahvabhuti was very well acquainted with that region. Rama says thus when he recognizes the Dandaka forest. Snigdashyamaha kvachidaparato bhishana bhogarukshaha sthane sthane mukharakakubho jhankrite nirjaranam ete tirthashramagiri sarit garta kantara mishraha sandrishyante parichitabuvo dandakaranya bhagaha. These regions of the Dandakaranya are dense and dark in some places and frightfully expansive and arid in some others. Here and there, they have filled the quarters with the noises of their gushing streams. These regions, dotted with sacred places, hermitages, hills, ditches, and forests, have indeed been familiar to me. In the third act, there is a dialogue between two rivers, Tamasa and Murala, which acquaint the audience how Agastya's wife Lopamudra sends word to Godavari for protection of Rama in his sad bereavement. The whole act is about the details of the lamentations of the royal pair occasioned by their presence in the forest. The main objective of this act is to remove from Sita's mind misapprehension about Rama due to his abandonment of her and to convince her about his altered love for her. In the beginning of the act, she refers to Rama as a king, but when she sees his pale face and weak body, she realizes that he has been suffering from long continued mental anguish. She also comes to know that he has not married again, but has made a golden image of her to be his partner in the performance of Ashwameda sacrifice. This action of Rama removes the dart of grief rankling in her mind. She says, Aryaputra idanim asitvam aho utkhatamidanim me parityagashalyam Aryaputrena. The sentiment of pathos is heightened to the extreme, supporting the popular saying, Karunyam Bhavabhutireva Tanute. Like the fourth act of the Shakuntala, the third act is unanimously considered to be the best of all of the acts of this play. In the fourth act, in the interlude, there's a dialogue between the two pupils of sage Valmiki, who inform the audience that preparations are made for the arrival of Vasishta, his wife, King Janaka, and the mothers of Rama. King Janaka, being overwhelmed with a grief for Sita, laments, Aniyatarudita smitam virajat katipaya komala dantaputmalagram Vadana Shishoho Smarami Skalada Samanjasa Mukta Jalpitam De. This verse already appears in Malati Madhava, where Kamandaki laments over the disappearance of Malati. This act ends with an incident when Lava leads the sacrificial horse to the hermitage, and while being stopped by the soldiers, he displays his martial skills. In the fifth act, Chandraketu arrives and openly challenges Lava to fight, and Lava, in the meanwhile, reduces the whole army to a paralyzed silence by means of his weapons, by means of his Rimbakastra. This fascinates Chandraketu, who descends from his chariot, where the two boys meet face to face and have a conversation. However, it also leads to a bitter end. In this act, the various facets of the character of Lava and Chandraketu, their valor, courtesy, pride, and so forth, are well reflected in their speeches. Chandraketu describes the two-front conflict of Lava thus: Darpena Kautukavata Mayibadda Lakshyah Paschadbalair Anusruto Ayam Udirna Dhanva Veda Samuddhata Marut Taralasya Dhatte Meghasya Madhavat Chapadharasya Lakshmi. He has fixed his gaze on me in pride mixed with curiosity. At the same time, he has raised his bow to fight with the forces that are attacking him from behind. He has thus the grace of a cloud bearing a rainbow, which is tossed by strong winds blowing from opposite directions. This verse contains a beautiful illustration of the Nidarshana figure of speech. When Chandraketu gets down from his chariot to fight with Lava, there is a commotion of feeling in Lava's heart, and he says, Yatendavanandam Rajati Samupode Kumudini Devasmin Drishtir Mama Kalaha Kamaha Punarayam Ranatkarat Krurat Panita Guna Gurudhanur Drita Prema Bahur Vikachita Vikaralol Balarasaha. As a lotus plant finds joy in the rays of the moon, even so do my eyes when they have a look at him. But this, my arm, that takes delight in heroic deeds and is fond of wielding this mighty bow, resounding with the terrible twang of its string, wants to fight. As the first half of this verse describes the joy that Lava experiences at the sight of Chandraketu, it is composed in the Vaidarbi style, with the use of soft consonants and avoidance of compounds. But the second half, which depicts Lava's martial spirit, is couched in the Gaudi style with the use of hard consonants and long compounds. Act 6 witnesses the meeting of Father Rama and his sons Lava and Kusha. Rama finally and unknowingly meets them and is with a sense of parental love while embracing them, and finds facial likeness amongst them, similar to the rays of Raghu, as well as the features of Sita. This is a verse describing what Rama feels when he sees his sons. He also sees from a distance all the elders along with King Janaka approaching him. Seeing them, he goes forth to meet them, being overwhelmed with grief. The interlude of this act contains a prolix description of the missiles discharged by Lava and Chandraketu against each other. It is full of long compounds. Act 7 displays a dramatic representation arranged to bring about the union of the royal couple, Rama and Sita, where Valmiki uses a creatively convincing method to assure the purity of Sita through this play. While the play moves on, the audience seem to be convinced of it, and even Rama calls upon his people to testify it. Arundhati then introduces Sita in person to bring back the consciousness of Rama, later addresses the assembled crowd, gently rebuking them for doubting. And with their union, and convincing method, with their union ends. This act has been designed to convince all the people of the country about Sita's character and to bring together all her relatives to meet her. The events that had happened after the abandonment of Sita have been shown in the Garbhanataka. Just as Sita's character was previously proved by the supernatural incident of the fire ordeal, it is here proved again by another similar supernatural incident of the emergence of Prithvi and Ganga in bodily form and their commendation of it. Karuna, pathos, is the principal sentiment of this play, as the poet himself has explicitly stated in the following verse. Eko rasaha karuna eva nimittam etad bhinnaha pratak pratakivashrayate vivartan avarta budbuda tarangamayan vikaran ambo yatha salilamevatu tat samagram. Though it is the same sentiment of pathos, it assumes different forms due to a diversity of causes, just as water, though unchanged, assumes varied forms such as whirlpools, bubbles, and billows. Though the main sentiment is Karuna, some other sentiments are introduced here and there in their subordinate form. There is Sambhoga and Ripalanga Shringara in the first act, Veerarasa in the description of battle between Lava and Chandraketu, and Adbhuta Rasa in the description of the Chimbika missile, and in the miraculous emergence of Prithvi and Ganga from the stream of the rivers in the last act. Bahvabhuti has in most places used the Vaidarbhi Riti, consisting of the use of soft letters and avoidance of long compounds. He has employed long compounds for the delineation of Veerarasa or in the description of natural scenery, where the question of sentiment does not arise. Bhavabhuti has himself stated in the prologue of Malati Madhava that he has mastered the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the philosophical systems of Sankhya and Yoga, though that learning may not be of any avail in the writing of plays. Yad Vedadhyanam Tatopanishadam Sankhyasya Yogasya cha Jnanam Tat Katharena Kim Nahi Tataha Kaschit Guno Natake. In the Mahavira Charita and the Uttararama Charita, Bhavabhuti has referred to philosophical knowledge that the sage Yajnavalkya had imparted to King Janaka, as described in the Brahadaranyaka Upanishad. There are numerous references to the yoga systems in his works. In his advice to Jamadagnya in the third act of Mahavira Charita, Vasishta refers to several technical terms of yoga, like the 4 attitudes, bhavanas, which are derived from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Several passages in the Malati Madhava also contain references to yogic concepts. That Bhavabhuti was conversant with the Nyaya philosophy is evidenced by the word pramana in the epithet Padavakya Pramanagnya applied to him. He was very well conversant with the rasa theory of Bharata. He has delineated the 3 sentiments, Veera, Shringara, and Karuna, in his plays Mahavira Charita, Malati Madhava, and Uttararama Charita, respectively. Bhavabhuti has faithfully followed the rule laid down by Dandin in his Kavya Darsha about the profuse use of compounds in prose passages. He was a connoisseur of art, a great dramatist, and an eminent poet. He has himself stated explicitly that mere knowledge of various learned subjects is of little avail in the writing of plays. What is essential is felicity and richness of expression and depth of meaning. Subandhau bhaktirnaha kahiha ragukare na ramate dhritir dakshibhutre harati harichandropi hridayam vishuddhoktihi shuraha prakriti madhura bharavi giraha tatapyantarmodam kamapi bhavabhutir vitante. This Subhashita states that though the works of the poets Subandhu, Kalidasa, Panini, Harichandra, Sura, and Bharavi are attractive, even each in its own way, those of Bhavabhuti give us an indescribable delight. With this, I conclude my lecture on Bhavabhuti and his works. I take this opportunity in thanking the endowment maker, Srimati Balambal Endowment, the Sanskrit Academy, and the Kusami Shastri Research Institute for giving me an opportunity to deliver this lecture on the Other Poets Day. Thank you.
எல்லாரும் அங்கேருந்தே கை தட்டிடலாம். Everybody will clap from their home. So, not only Bhavabhuti was well versed in yoga, I think Mrs. Lavanya is also practicing pranayama because she read or she spoke without even breathing. So she spoke in one breath as if she read everything or spoke everything in one breath. It was very informative and also very illuminating talk. We learned many things about Bhavabhuti, how Bhavabhuti has been mentioned by the ancient writers, including by the authors of Tilakamanjari and Gaudavaho, Vakpati Raja. And then we have Kuntaka of Vakrokti Jivita fame. And of course, Abhinavagupta himself has referred to Bhavabhuti in his commentary on Natya Shastra. And then Rajashekara, himself a great dramatist, he has also referred to Bhavabhuti. And of course, in Alankara text, Bhavabhuti's quotations have been given as source for some Alankaras. So she quoted from Vamana. And we had a glimpse of the three plays of Bhavabhuti, Mahavira Charita, and Malati Madhava, and Uttara Ramacharita. As the saying goes, Uttare Ramacharite Bhavabhuti Vishishyate. So it is in Uttara Ramacharita, Bhavabhuti excels. Everyone, perhaps he excelled himself. So that is one thing. And I think some of the scholars can take up different aspects of Bhavabhuti, as she mentioned, that Bhavabhuti himself says that he was well versed with Vedas, Upanishads, Sankhya, Yoga, and other schools of philosophy like Nyaya and so on. So we can start collecting some information and we can contribute something to prove that Bhavabhuti indeed was such a learned poet and dramatist. And within, correctly, she stopped at 1 hour. So within the span of 1 hour, she was able to bring out the salient features of Bhavabhuti's works, as well as Bhavabhuti's birthplace, a glimpse of his literary contribution, how his words have been wonderfully chosen. That is also very important, where the long compounds have to be used, where short compounds have to be used, whether the style Gaudi has to be followed or other style has to be followed. And especially in the Natya, they have got a lot of technical aspects to be adhered to strictly. And Bhavabhuti has done justice to be respected by the letter writers as one of the greatest dramatists that our country has produced. And these things have been well brought out by Srimati Lavanya in her talk today. And I thank Mrs. Lavanya for her
Thank you, sir.
for her acceptance as well as her beautiful presentation of the life and works of the great dramatist Bhavabhuti. And I also thank the endowment makers called Other Poets Day. For a long time, I think we didn't have anyone talking about Bhavabhuti. We had other poets, but Bhavabhuti, though well known, I think for some reason or other, many people did not choose Bhavabhuti, and after many, many years, I think we got an opportunity to listen from Mrs. Lavanya about the contribution of Bhavabhuti to Sanskrit literature. So we are thankful to you, madam, and we are
Thank you,
thankful to the endowment makers, and we are thankful to all those who have assembled for today's lecture. And please offer your suggestions in the boxes here. If there are any queries also, later on it will be easy for her to answer these things, and also it will be good for us to know where we stand. So once again, I thank all of you, and may you all spend time brooding over the ideas of Bhavabhuti. Thank you very much.
Very nice, Lavanya.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.